My name is Clara. I'm 31 years old. And the moment my father stood up at my wedding reception, tapped his glass with a butter knife, and told a room full of 160 guests that I was nothing, that everything I had, everything I'd built, everything I'd become was because of him, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat in my white dress with my hands folded in my lap, and I smiled because I already knew what was coming for him. I'd been preparing for it for 11 months. And the 12-page report sitting in a judge's office downtown was going to say everything I never could. Let me take you back. I grew up in Ashburn, Virginia, in a 4-bedroom colonial that my father liked to remind us he paid for every single day. My mother left when I was 9. She didn't fight for custody. She just vanished. Packed 2 suitcases on a Tuesday in March and took a Greyhound to her sister's place in Tucson. I didn't hear from her again until I was 23, and by then, I didn't want to. My father, Richard Hale, raised me and my younger brother Derek alone, and he made sure we knew the cost. My father was a commercial real estate broker, successful, sharp, well-dressed, the kind of man people respected in a room and feared in private. He never hit us. I want to be clear about that. But he had a way of making you feel like you owed him your next breath. Every meal, every school supply, every pair of shoes came with a receipt, sometimes literally. He kept a ledger in his office, a green notebook where he tracked what he spent on us. He called it accountability. When I was 14, he showed me the running total. He said I owed him $41,000. He said it with a straight face. Derek was different. Derek was the one who looked like him, talked like him, played golf with him on Sundays. Derek got a car at 16. I got a bus pass. Derek went to the University of Virginia on my father's dime. I went to community college on a Pell Grant and worked 30 hours a week at a veterinary clinic to cover my books. My father told me I wasn't smart enough for a real university. He said it casually, the way you'd mention the weather. Clara, you're a hard worker, but you're not sharp. That's fine. The world needs worker bees. I believed him for a long time. After community college, I transferred to George Mason, graduated with a degree in accounting, passed my CPA exam on the first try, and got hired at a mid-size firm in Fairfax. Within 4 years, I'd made senior associate. By 28, I'd opened my own small practice, Hale Financial Consulting, doing tax strategy and bookkeeping for small businesses. I had 11 clients in the first year. By the second year, I had 34. I was earning more than I ever imagined, and my father never once said he was proud. What he said was, "Don't get too comfortable. Small businesses fail all the time." He said, "You should have gone into real estate. There's real money in real estate." He said, at Thanksgiving dinner in front of Derek's wife and 2 friends, "Clara's little hobby is doing well, I guess, but she's always had to do things the hard way." Derek laughed. He always laughed. Then I met James Park, a civil engineer who built bridges for a living and made me feel, for the first time, like I wasn't carrying one on my back. We dated for 1.5 years. He proposed at a park in Old Town Alexandria, on a bench near the water where we'd had our first real conversation. It was quiet and simple and mine. When I told my father, he said, "Let me handle the wedding." I should have said no. He offered to pay for the venue, the catering, the flowers, the whole thing. He said it was his gift. He said, "I wasn't there for you the way I should have been, Clara. Let me do this." And I wanted so badly to believe that sentence was real that I handed him the reins. He booked the venue without asking me, a country club he had business connections with. He changed the florist. He invited 40 people I'd never met, business contacts and golf buddies, and a state senator he was trying to impress. He seated me at a table that felt like his table. And when I pushed back gently, carefully, the way I'd learned to speak to him, he said, "You can plan your own wedding when you can afford one." James told me we should elope. I wish I had listened. The wedding was October 14th. It was beautiful on the surface. The weather held, the food was good, the venue sparkled. But I was tense the entire day because I could feel my father performing. He walked me down the aisle with a grip on my arm that was a little too firm. He smiled at the photographer with a smile I recognized, the one he used to close deals. And then came the toast. He stood up at the head table, adjusted his tie, and held his champagne glass like a prop. He started off fine, talked about watching me grow up, about how stubborn I was as a child. People chuckled. Then his tone shifted. He talked about how he'd sacrificed everything as a single father. He talked about paying for my education, which he hadn't. He talked about giving me my start in business, which he hadn't. He said, "Clara wouldn't be standing here today without me. She knows that. Everything she has, I gave her." And then he looked at James and said, "Take care of her, son. She's tough, but she's nothing without her family behind her. Nothing." The room went quiet, not the polite kind of quiet, the uncomfortable kind, where people stare at their plates. James put his hand on my knee under the table. I didn't move. I didn't react. I just looked at my father's face and I saw it clearly. Maybe for the first time, he wasn't celebrating me. He was claiming me. My brother was clapping. After the wedding, I couldn't sleep for 3 days. I kept replaying the toast, kept hearing that word nothing, and I kept asking myself why it hurt so much when I already knew he thought it. James held me on the couch on the 3rd night and said, "You don't have to keep auditioning for someone who's already decided you failed." That sentence cracked something open. A week later, I sat down at my desk at work and started doing what I do best. I pulled numbers, not his mine. I went through every financial record I had going back to age 18. Every tuition payment, every rent check, every loan, every tax return. I cross-referenced them with every claim he had ever made. And what I found wasn't just annoying, it was criminal. Here's what I discovered. When I was 20, my grandmother, my mother's mother, Eleanor Voss, passed away. I knew that. What I didn't know was that she left me an inheritance. $67,000 placed in a custodial trust managed by my father until I turned 21. I never saw a dime of it. I never even knew it existed. I found the record buried in a probate filing in Loudoun County. The trust was supposed to transfer to me on the 4th of April 2014. It never did. I requested the bank records. It took 3 weeks and a notarized letter, but I got them. The trust account had been drained in 4 withdrawals between March and June of 2014. The money went into my father's personal checking account. From there, $22,000 went toward a down payment on Derek's condo. Another $18,000 went to the country club membership my father bragged about. The rest was scattered a vacation, a car repair, a chunk to a brokerage account in his name. He stole my inheritance and used it to fund Derek's life and his own lifestyle. I sat at my kitchen table with the bank statements spread out in front of me, and I pressed my palms flat on the paper and I breathed. I didn't cry. I was past crying. I was in the part of grief that looks like arithmetic. I called my friend Nora, who practices estate law in Arlington. I told her everything. She was quiet for a long time and then she said, "Clara, this is breach of fiduciary duty. This is conversion. Depending on how it was structured, this could be fraud. You need to file." I did. But I didn't rush. I spent the next 3 months building my case the way I build a client's tax file: methodical, complete, airtight. I pulled the original trust documents. I obtained the probate court records. I got certified copies of every bank transaction. I documented every public claim my father had made about supporting me financially, including a Facebook post from 2019 where he wrote, "Proud to have funded Clara's education and career. A father's investment pays off." That post had 83 likes. It was a lie, and now I could prove it. Nora referred me to a litigation attorney named David Chen. David was calm, precise, and relentless. He filed a civil suit against my father for breach of fiduciary duty, conversion of trust assets, and unjust enrichment. The total claim, including interest and damages, was $94,000. My father was served on a Tuesday in February. He called me 14 minutes later. "What the hell is this, Clara?" I said. "Read it. You're suing me? Your own father? After everything I've done for you? Read it, Dad, then call your lawyer." He hung up. Then Derek called. Then Derek's wife called. Then my father's girlfriend called. I let every call go to voicemail. Each message was a variation of the same theme. I was ungrateful, I was greedy, I was tearing the family apart. Derek's voicemail said, "You know Dad did everything for us. You're going to ruin him over some old bank account? Grow up." I saved every message. The hearing was scheduled for June. My father hired an attorney from his golf network, a man named Phil Hargrove who wore a lot of cufflinks and talked like he was narrating a documentary about himself. In the preliminary filings, they argued the money had been a gift from my grandmother to the family as a whole, not specifically to me. They argued my father had used it for household expenses that benefited Clara. They even argued that because I hadn't asked about the money sooner, I had implicitly waived my claim. David dismantled every point. The trust document named me Clara Renee Hale as the sole beneficiary. The custodial structure required transfer at age 21 with a documented accounting. There was no accounting, there was no transfer, and there was no ambiguity. In the weeks before the hearing, something unexpected happened. My mother called. I hadn't spoken to her in 6 years. She'd seen a post Nora's paralegal accidentally liked on Facebook, a link to the court docket. My mother said, "Your grandmother wanted that money for you. She told me before she died. She said, 'Make sure Richard doesn't touch it.'" She paused. "I should have been there to make sure. I'm sorry, Clara." I didn't forgive her in that moment. But I let her speak, and she agreed to provide a written declaration about my grandmother's intentions. It was notarized and submitted to the court 4 days before the hearing. The hearing took place on June 12th. I wore a gray suit. My father wore the same expression he wore at my wedding, controlled, confident, superior. He didn't look at me once. The judge was the Honorable Patricia Sunderland. She was in her 60s, with reading glasses on a chain and a voice that didn't waste words. She had reviewed the filings in advance, and she had prepared what David later told me was a 12-page written report summarizing her findings. She read portions of it aloud in court. She started with the facts. The trust was valid. The beneficiary was unambiguous. The custodial transfer should have occurred on the 4th of April 2014. It did not. The funds were withdrawn by the custodian, my father, and redirected to personal accounts with no documentation, no authorization, and no disclosure to the beneficiary. Then she addressed my father directly. "Mr. Hale, you were entrusted with the financial welfare of your daughter. You were given legal authority to manage these funds on her behalf, and you used that authority to take what was hers and spend it on yourself and your other child. That is not parenting. That is not generosity. That is a violation of the law, and of the most basic obligation a parent holds." My father's jaw tightened. Phil Hargrove shuffled papers. The judge continued. "The court finds in favor of the plaintiff. The defendant is ordered to pay the full amount of the original trust, $67,000, plus accrued interest at the statutory rate, plus attorney's fees and costs. The total judgment is $103,412. $103,000. My father gripped the edge of the table. She wasn't finished. She noted that the evidence also supported a referral to the county attorney for potential criminal review. She said she would forward the file. I watched my father's face when she said that. It was the first time I'd ever seen him look small. We walked out of the courthouse into bright June sunlight. David shook my hand. James was waiting on the steps. He didn't ask how it went. He just put his arms around me and held on. My father didn't speak to me after the hearing. Derek sent one more text. "I hope you're happy. You've destroyed this family." I responded with one line. The family was destroyed long before I filed anything. He didn't reply. The judgment was paid in full within 90 days. My father had to liquidate a portion of his brokerage account to do it. "I don't know if the county attorney pursued criminal charges," David said. "These things move slowly and quietly, and I decided I didn't need to track it. The civil judgment was public record." That was enough. My father's girlfriend left him a few months later. I heard that through a cousin. I don't know the details, and I didn't ask. Derek and I haven't spoken since. I'm at peace with that. I didn't lose a brother. I lost the idea of one. I used part of the money to pay off the last of my student loans, the ones my father told people he'd covered. I put the rest into a savings account earmarked for the future. James and I bought a house in the fall, a small Cape Cod with a garden and a red front door. I planted tomatoes in the backyard and I thought about my grandmother, a woman I barely knew, who loved me enough to leave me something and trusted the wrong person to protect it. I still run my practice. I have 41 clients now. I'm good at what I do not because someone made me, but because I made myself, and I no longer carry the weight of proving that to anyone. If you've made it this far, there are 3 things I want you to take with you. First, document everything. I know it sounds cold, I know it sounds clinical, but the difference between a story people dismiss and a case that changes your life is paper. Dates, amounts, records. Keep them. Second, silence isn't peace. I spent years being quiet to keep things smooth, and all it did was give my father more room to take what wasn't his. Speaking up cost me relationships I thought I needed, but the ones I kept, James, Nora, a handful of real friends, those are the ones that matter. Third, you are not what someone calls you. My father called me nothing in front of everyone I loved. A judge called him a liar in front of everyone who mattered. But the truth is, I didn't need the judge to tell me who I was. I already knew. The ruling just made sure the record was straight. If this story meant something to you, leave a comment. Tell me your story. Subscribe if you want to hear more. And remember, the people who try hardest to make you feel small are usually the ones most afraid of how big you're about to become.